Welcome to our deep dive. Ready na ba kayo? Today, we're unpacking a really dynamic and critical topic: the delicate balance between government accountability and fundamental fairness in the Philippines. From the highest offices to the basic rights of every single citizen, let's unpack how our justice system wields both a sword to strike down corruption and a shield to protect the innocent.
Okay, let's dive into this. Public office is a public trust. You've probably heard this a million times, right? But it's not just a catchy slogan. This is the foundational macro concept of our entire government structure. Nakasaad mismo sa ating 1987 Constitution that every single public official is ultimately accountable to the Filipino people. Ang ibig sabihin nito, every position in government is a privilege granted by the public, carrying a massive burden of responsibility and integrity.
Here's our roadmap for this material. We're going to start with public office and public trust, then look at the power of impeachment, check out Rule 65, move into Rule 64 and grave abuse, discuss the Bill of Rights, and finally, impartiality and the burden of proof. Let's get to it.
Section 1. Public office, public trust.
So, think about the inherent problem of government abuse. As Filipinos, we have this heavily protected right to seek accountability from our officials. Section 1, Article 11 of the Constitution doesn't just ask nicely, it demands that officials act with patriotism and justice and lead modest lives. This isn't just some nice ideal, it's a strict constitutional command. Kapag may nagkamali o umabuso, the public has the absolute legal right to demand answers.
Moving on to Section 2, the power of impeachment. Now, think of accountability as a sword, the aggressive legal weapon we use to attack corruption. And the heaviest sword of all, impeachment. But here's what's really interesting. Hindi lahat ng public officials pwedeng impeach. Look at this exclusive list. The President, the Vice President, Supreme Court Justices, Constitutional Commissioners, and the Ombudsman. That's it. If you're a mayor or a senator, you're dealt with through totally different legal channels. Now, an impeachment proceeding is what we call sui generis, meaning it's completely in a class of its own. It is so crucial to understand na hindi ito isang ordinary criminal trial. It's actually a political safeguard designed to preserve the state and figure out if an official is still fit to lead. A conviction here strips you of power, pero hindi ka nito direktang ipapadala sa kulungan right then and there. It's a political mechanism meant to vindicate the public's violated trust. Let's break down how this actually works. Impeachment is essentially a two-step dance between the two chambers of Congress. Step 1 happens in the House of Representatives, where they initiate the whole process. They need a 1/3 vote of all members to approve the articles of impeachment. Kung pumasa ito, we jump to Step 2, the Senate trial. Here, the senators put on their judge hats, and it takes a much heavier 2/3 vote to actually convict and remove the official. It's an intricate system of checks and balances.
All right, Section 3, checking power with Rule 65.
Let's shift gears a bit to see how the judiciary checks government power. Take a look at the target's error row here. Rule 45 is your standard appeal, like if a judge simply makes a mistake in interpreting the law. But Rule 65, that's an extraordinary remedy. Gagamitin mo ito kapag may error of jurisdiction. It's not just about a tribunal being wrong, it's about them acting without the actual legal power to do so.
Section 4, Rule 64, and grave abuse.
You are going to hear this phrase constantly in Philippine law. Grave abuse of discretion. But what does that actually look like? Hindi ito simpleng pagkakamali lang ng isang judge. It means a public officer acted arbitrarily, capriciously, or in a despotic manner. Imagine a judge literally ignoring hard evidence and deciding a case just based on pure personal whim. That whimsical exercise of judgment is so bad, it's as if they had zero jurisdiction in the first place.
So where does Rule 64 fit into this puzzle? Well, it's essentially Rule 65, but custom-fitted for specific cases. Rule 64 is exclusively used to review the final judgments of just two constitutional bodies, the COA and the COMELEC. Also, take note of the time limit. You only get 30 days under Rule 64, while Rule 65 gives you 60 days for general tribunals. But for both, the whole point is proving that grave abuse of discretion actually happened.
But wait, let's pivot for a second. We've talked a lot about the sword of accountability, right? Impeachment, checking abuses. But what happens when the government itself becomes the abuser during these processes? Who protects the accused, whether that's an ordinary citizen or an impeached official, from the massive, overwhelming machinery of the state? Well, we're going to need a shield.
Which brings us to Section 5, the Bill of Rights.
This right here is the ultimate protection mechanism hardwired into our Constitution. The whole purpose of the Bill of Rights is crystal clear: to make sure our aggressive pursuit of accountability doesn't just turn into blind oppression. As the Supreme Court has pointed out, an individual is basically just a speck compared to the vast power of the government. The Bill of Rights guarantees due process and the presumption of innocence. Kahit gaano pa kagusto ng taong bayan na may maparusahan, it absolutely cannot come at the cost of our basic human rights and fundamental liberties.
And finally, Section 6, impartiality and burden of proof. So the crucial point is how justice is actually administered on the ground. True justice demands an absolutely unbiased tribunal, what we call the cold neutrality of an impartial judge. A judge, or even a senator acting as an impeachment judge, cannot lean to one side of the fulcrum. If the person deciding your fate has already made up their mind before the trial even starts, the whole system of accountability just collapses into a fake performance.
And here's another totally non-negotiable rule. The burden of proof never shifts. It is always, always on the prosecution or the accuser to prove guilt. The accused? They don't have to prove their innocence because the Constitution already presumes they are innocent. Whether you're dealing with a civil case, a criminal trial, or an impeachment proceeding, this fundamental rule is the ultimate shield against baseless attacks.
Let's put this all together. Accountability and fairness, they aren't opposites. They are partners. Justice literally requires absolute fairness. The presumption of innocence has to remain completely intact, and due process must be strictly observed. Any legal or political mechanism, if you apply it without these fair standards, well, that's just an abuse of power dressed up to look like justice.
Which leaves us with this thought to chew on. We all want a clean, honest government, right? But if the methods we use to punish corruption strip away fairness, impartiality, and due process, aren't we just creating a brand new form of abuse? It's a really delicate balance between wielding the sword and raising the shield. Thank you so much for joining our deep dive today. Keep learning and always seek to understand the rules that govern our society.